Good morning. Welcome back. I hope everybody enjoyed their weekend. First off, let me just go ahead and say I really enjoyed a lot of the speeches. Very well done, well delivered, well organized. Just a couple of things that we got to watch out for, especially once we get to the persuasive speech. Number one, people, you got to cite your sources. I very much was strongly about that beforehand. Making sure that you tell us where you got the information from. Most people did it very well. Some people missed out and didn't cite their sources at all. And number two, one of the bigger things that I wanted to hit on, which is something new. Something that if we were in the classroom doing face-to-face, you wouldn't have to worry about. And that, of course, is lighting. Some of you had no problem. You've got nice HD cameras and whatever device that you were using. But with some of you, with the lighting and stuff, and again, people, this is on you too, all right? Some of you, one of the things that you don't want to do, and I've said many times, when you do a speech, you've got to practice that speech. And I've said before, when I'm giving a speech for the Veterans Day ceremony, I practice that speech at least 14 times, and I do this for a living. So if you got to practice your speech at least 3 times, and then watch it over. Have an idea of what it is you're sending to me. I'm grading it. So when I get a video and I can't even see your face, it's so dark because you don't have good lighting, well then don't ask me, was it really that bad? Of course it was that bad. You saw it. So these are things that you got to check on now, and especially, like I said, in the future, this is the way things are going to be. More than ever, I'm totally convinced that as you all progress through getting an associate's, a bachelor's degree or more, and you're in a professional position, that the whole viral thing will continue. Sure, we'll get back to face-to-face stuff in offices and everything else doing business, but this is also going to continue because it's cost efficient. And if there's one thing about companies, they like to be cost efficient. So make sure that your lighting, especially for the persuasive speech, I can't grade you people if I can't see you. All right? All right, now, for those who handed in their speeches late, I'm getting to the late speeches. All right? But it's going to be a while because we're moved on to other things. So I will get to the late speeches when I can. But now let's go ahead and move on to something else. A big reason why I prefer the Com-100 over the Com-102. Now, I have taught Com-102 before, many years ago, public speaking, and that's all you do. You do a lot more of the formal speeches than we do here. But a big reason I like Com-100 is for things like group communication, okay? Because if there's one thing I learned, especially in the private sector, and I was able to work outside of education for many years before getting into education permanently, is you do a lot of group communication. Whether I, worked at the radio station or the television station or in other jobs that I had, even in manual labor positions, there were still times when something had to be done and you had, or a solution to a problem or something like that, and you had to get together in a group. All right. So I love talking about group communication. And what group communication is, pretty much is an assemblage of people who come together to either come up with an idea or find a solution to a problem. And it's something that you see everywhere. As a matter of fact, in high school and especially in college, if there's one thing that teachers and professors love to do is to break you into groups. All right? Or especially if you're in one of our science courses. All right? If you're in bio or chemistry or something like that, A&P1, you're always in groups in your labs. All right? Or especially, oh my goodness, you think I'm the one talking about group and how important it is? Go check out our nursing program or dental hygiene program. They spend their entire time at Bergen from the first day they start the program until they graduate with their PIN, working in groups, studying in groups. Okay? And one of the reasons why, especially because they like to keep the number between 5, 6, and 7 people in a group. Now, the biggest reason why is one of the most important parts of group is that you're able to establish equal and active participation. Now, this is important in a group because, if I put 4, 5, 6 people into a group, I'm expecting to get 4, 5, or 6 unique perspectives. But if I put 6 people in a group and only 2 people do all the work and the other 4 people don't do anything, then it's not a group. It's a duo. Only those 2 people. But that's not what I was looking for. I wasn't looking for just those 2 perspectives. I'm looking for 5 or 6 unique perspectives. Now, it's tough to go past 7 people in a group because now you're going to get too many people who are not going to be actively participating. So 5, 6, 7 people, you don't want to go past 7 people, but you want at least 4 to 5 to make sure you're covering a wide spectrum of ideas. Now, there's all kinds of different places where we see groups. Okay? For example, in the workplace, and you see this all the time. One of my favorite stories I like to tell is my second semester at Bergen was the spring of 2000. And I taught the first ever Com-100 at the brand new CRCO Learning Center down in Hackensack. Of course, now it's 20 years old. And one of the students who took my class there was a young lady who, it was an 8 o'clock in the morning class, and she took it there because right after class she went to work down at the Sears on Main Street in Hackensack, and she was in charge of the women's department. And she really helped us out that day, or that year, because she talked about, you know, when any of the big sales were coming up, Labor Day sale, Valentine's Day sale, Columbus Day, or especially Black Friday, one person from each department would get together in a conference room and go back and forth. How do you best display your sales items? How do you best schedule your people? So, yeah, I mean, she was really helpful. And then a semester later, this is really early in my tenure at Bergen, I had a student named Zach who worked at the California Pizza Kitchen over at Garden State Plaza. And he would tell me that whenever corporate was coming down to do an inspection, or if a bunch of new people came in, you know, sometime after 9:30 when the gates came down, the wait staff and the cooks would get together and they'd just start discussing how to best communicate with one another. All right? And there's many other places. I mean, once a month, I'm either with my department meeting, and my department I don't think has more than 8 or 9 full-time faculty, especially if it's speech. There's only like 5 or 6 speech professors, full-time that is. Or when I was chair, and I'm still a member of, I'm not the chair anymore, of the Veterans Committee at Bergen. Typically at our meetings we only have 5 or 6 people, and we'll usually go for 50 minutes to an hour. Okay, so I'm constantly in these groups and always equally and actively, everybody getting involved. We don't allow people to come to a meeting and not get themselves actively involved in the meeting, whether it's giving their critiques, coming up with ideas, giving their opinion, their 2 cents, putting it in, making sure that they're actively participating. Okay, but there are other different type of groups that are out there too. You know, you have like support groups or growth groups. All right. Now, the first kind that come up are generally going to be like, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Smokers Anonymous. A lot that have to do. That's my wife in the background. Say hi, mommy.
Hi.
There she is. A lot that have to do with addiction-related illnesses, but a lot of them have really successful groups. I mean, AA has been around for a long time. And one of the things that makes AA and these other groups so very successful is the fact that you'll get everyone in the group who's all been in your shoes. You know, like for example, let's say, you know, if you have a brother or sister, they love you, they care about you, but if you're an alcoholic, there's one thing they don't know. They don't know why you need to have that alcohol. Why? Why are you doing this to us? Whereas if you go to an AA meeting, every person at that meeting, including the person running that meeting, has lived a day in your shoes. And that's why those groups are so very successful. Now, there's another type that I've also mentioned, and there's a big reason why I really like this. I kind of hinted at it already, and that is study groups. Study groups are really important. All right, and here's the reason why. A lot of you may not have thought of this offhand, but I think about it because it happens to me. You're in class, all right? And let's say it's a face-to-face class, and you're taking notes, and all of a sudden you look outside and you see a squirrel, especially this time of year. I have had students, and actually when I was a student too, who'd look out a window during class, and a squirrel gathering nuts on a branch is like the most fascinating thing you've ever seen, all right? But what ends up happening is that you're spending 5 or 10 minutes like losing it, dozing off, or as I call it, zoning out. There could have been something very important discussed. So now you're studying chapter 3. You know that's going to be on the midterm, and you remember she talked about this, this, and this. That's what you study. You get to the midterm, and the only thing from chapter 3 is that. But you didn't study that. You only studied this, this, and this. You don't remember her talking about that. Well, yeah, she did talk about that. That's when you were zoning out in class. You know, maybe you're thinking about what you're doing that weekend. Maybe you're talking about what you did the night before. But we zone out. I zone out all the time. I mean, for example, those of you who are veterans of Bergen, you go back a year ago or so, and we have that day of development or whatever it is, where they close the school down. You guys don't have class, but all the faculty and staff have to come in for a day full of workshops and everything else. Let me tell you something. I could barely keep my attention during those days. Okay? At the end of a day, if you ask me, hey, what happened in session number 2 from 10 o'clock to 11:30, I couldn't tell you at all. I zoned out. Those things are boring. But for you guys, of course, being in a classroom is a little different. So now if you're in a study group and there's 2 or 3 other people sitting at a table with you, and you go ahead and say to them, all right, don't forget from chapter 3, we're definitely on the midterm, we're going to have this, this, and this, because I remember her talking about that 2 weeks ago. And then somebody across from you says, well, what about that? And you're like, I don't remember her talking about that. And then they tell you, and then you realize, oh, I must have been zoning out when I was watching the scoreboard. Yes, you're right. She did talk about that. Okay. And you end up acing the midterm. All right. Study groups, and that's why, again, you can always tell on our campus when the dental hygiene program or the nursing program has a big test coming up. Because you could go either to the library or into one of the areas of the medical building, and you will literally see 5 or 6 people at a table with their little white jackets behind the chairs and notebooks and textbooks spread out all over the table. One day we had a fire drill. It was in the summer. Well, I think it was in the summer, yeah. So we're outside in the quad where that new outside, the outdoor classroom is now. And I see one of my students from the semester before. And I'm asking her how she's doing. She says, yeah, I'm now in the nursing program. Oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear it. I said, so what class do you have here today? She says, oh, I'm not here for class today. We're just here to study. Her and her study group from her nursing program were at the library spending 8.5 hours studying. All right. And of course, if you're going to study that much, you're going to be in a study group. But there's one more group I want to talk about that's really important when it comes to effective group communication. And that's the family. Yeah, I mean, when you think of the family, sometimes you generally think about like where we're going on vacation. Maybe if you were lucky, unlike me when I was a kid, after dinner, you clear up the table, everybody comes back to the table, mom and dad say, okay, where do you want to go on vacation this year? And then you settle on one in particular, all right? And that's where you're going. I say unlike me because when I was a kid, it was 1 week down in the seaside. I got $2 in quarters because the wheels on the boardwalk were all a quarter at the time. And that was about it. But yeah, it's the family because, you think about the vacation thing, that's one thing, but there's other reasons that you get together with the family and you need effective group communication. Great example, and I get this example all the time from students in class. If you're watching me right now as a student, more than likely your grandparents are now retired. And then unfortunately, maybe your grandpa passes. All right? And now your grandma lives alone, and God bless her, she's a sweetheart, she does well on her own, but she really can't live on her own anymore. So now it's a Saturday night, everybody's over your parents' house, and it's your aunts and your uncles, your cousins, you celebrate some birthdays, some anniversaries. Dinner's done, you bring like the cannolis and the cookies and the cake and the coffee out. Of course, Italians, I'm at 60% Italian. So it's the cookies and the cannolis. You bring them out for dessert. And then there's your mom and dad, your one aunt and uncle, and your other aunt and uncle. And now the conversation begins, what are we going to do with mama? Okay, so now those adults will go back and forth and having a discussion about what's going to end up happening with your grandma since she can't live on her own anymore. These are the kind of discussions, and there are many times this happens, especially there's a lot of you who I've spoken to, especially during the WebEx meeting. who are not from the United States and have family back in another country. And I've had students tell me just in the recent past how they've had these FaceTime conversations or through, what's the old one, the one that really started it all? Skype. They'll have Skype meetings where they have to talk about, like, what was the one that came up 2 semesters ago where a young lady said that, her grandmother had to come over to America to live because her grandfather died back in their home. It was like the Dominican Republic or something, or actually I think it might have been Eastern Europe. It might have been like Albania or something. And they had to bring the grandmother over, and like 1 or 2 of the siblings were still over in Europe, and the rest were here in America, but not all in the same state. And it was taking months. And that's one of the key items about effective group communication, is you must give yourself a considerable amount of time to ensure that you come up with the absolute best result. A lot of people think you get into a group and you take 15 minutes and you'll have a decision. It ain't going to happen that way. It just doesn't happen that way. So those situations, like the one I've described, are some of the many that have seemed to come up in the family. And that's what I want you to do for your assignment. So go ahead, open up your attachment, read it over, and then give me an example of what's been going on with you lately. What group meeting have you had recently with your family? Those are due by Wednesday night at 8 p.m., and then we'll talk to you on Thursday. See you soon.